Welcome to the walkthrough of frequently made mistakes for assignment 3 in my CS 5253 class in the fall of 2022. First, please document your code thoroughly. Each aggregate operation or completion stage method, etc. should have a comment. Henceforth, code that's not documented will not be reviewed. Let's take a look at some problems with the field initializations. M0 should not be set to null. Likewise, M0 should not be set to the results of calling supply async, which is inefficient. Instead, you want to use the result from the completed future method. Now let's take a look at a problem that exists with perform crawl. This method is way too complicated. All you need to do is call the crawl page async method, followed by calling the join method. Speaking of crawl page async, let's take a look at some issues here. First, please don't comment your code like this, since it's very hard to read. You don't want your code or your comments to be splitting across the lines. That's not good style. We've talked about this before, so make sure you fix that. Down here, don't return null, return M0. That's why it's defined. Here's another problem with crawl page async. Please use the M0 field here, which is why it's defined, rather than calling completed future again. Now we'll turn our attention to some issues with crawl page helper. This code is also way too complicated. There's no need to use a Java stream here. All you need to do is call the 4 helper methods that are defined below in the sequence that's described in the specification comments above. And down here, please don't call then combine async, which is the wrong call to make, but instead call the combine results method. Let's take a look at some other issues with crawl page helper. So please use the get page async method here rather than using supply async directly. And down here, please remove the local variable and then go ahead and return the results from calling combine results. We don't want to be having local variables who exist only to be returned on the next line of code. Let's take a look at some issues with get page async. First of all, again, we don't need to have an extra variable here. You can just return the result of calling supply async. And down here, you want to make sure you call the right factor method. You need to call supply async, not completed future, which is not a factor method and will not cause the computations to run in a background thread. Let's take a look at some issues with get images on page async. Here you want to use a method reference for both of these calls to completion stage methods rather than using a lambda expression. Down here, you do not want to be using the all-of method, but instead use then combine in the combine results method. And then down here, for combine results, you want to replace this lambda expression with a very simple method reference, much easier to deal with, having to do with summing of integers. Yet another issue with combine results, please don't use then combine async. That doesn't conform to the spec. And again, please use the appropriate method reference here instead of a lambda expression. Continuing on down, don't pass image here. You don't need to pass that. It's looking for pages, not images. Don't call then apply here. This call to collect won't compile since you're not providing the collector. And this call to then apply won't compile since it's not providing the action. Down here, something very important is missing in the method call below. This code will give you very weird errors if you do it this way, so make sure you fix that. Over here, this call to get page element as stream is incorrect. You need to take a look at what the specification comment says above and do that. Down here, don't use the filter call here. If you use the right method call up there, you don't need to use filter. If you use the right method call up above here, you don't need to use map. And down here, you don't want to increment the depth by 1. That should be done in the crawl page helper method above. In this particular implementation of process images, the URLs parameter is already a stream, so there's no need to call .sequential on it. That's overkill. Down here, make sure you use method reference instead of a lambda expression. Here, make sure to use a method reference, not a lambda expression, and that will make your code much better. Here's another issue with process image. This implementation is completely incorrect. It doesn't conform to the specification comment above. I don't know what this is doing, but it's definitely not following what's in the specification. Down here, again, this code is incorrect and it doesn't conform to the specification comments above. You don't need to be using reduce, and also don't think you want to use then apply there. Down here, please chain all these calls together using the fluent interface pattern. In other words, remove the local variable CF. Don't need to do that. In this method, don't be using stream of. That's completely unnecessary. As before, .stream returns a sequential stream, so there's no need to say .sequential here. And also, don't write your code like this, please. We talk about this all the time. Make sure you put each operation on its own line with the dot first. This code is very hard to understand and read because it's going off the end of the page. And moreover, you also don't want to be calling find first followed by or else 0 here because you're returning a stream and there's no need to go ahead and turn that into something else. Then finally, the transform image method. Don't use the .map method here, use .filter. And this code won't compile because the collect method has been eliminated. So please make sure that you go through and fix all the problems that I identify here. Also, make sure you document your code. And finally, it's very important to make sure that you run the unit tests to try to see what's wrong. If you're running unit tests and unit tests are failing, you really need to come to office hours. Don't just sit there passively and wait till you get review comments, but you need to be proactive and come to office hours and make sure you get feedback.